Welcome back to Kansas City Real Talk, brought to you by KCRER. I'm Alex Gehring, and I'm here with Bobbi. How? Bobbi?
What's up, friend?
How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good.
Good. All right, so here's my situation. I go on all these work conferences and whatnot for several years. I'm not doing it really anymore, right? I'm not going on a bunch of this stuff as much, right? Maybe one or two a year. Sarah went to a work conference this week, and so I'm hanging out with the three children, and one of them has a fever, I found out, and so and also I didn't sleep well last night. So I've got all of these things, right? And it's like a man cold, you know? You know what I mean? Like we've talked about man colds, I feel like on the podcast before. I feel like that's come up where, you know, women get a cold and they plow through it and it's not a thing, and then a guy gets a cold and they got to lay on the couch for a week. I feel that way right now about hanging out with my three children on my own. I also just finished an opera. Sarah was at home with all three kids for like 2 weeks straight. And so, and I did one night, and I didn't get much sleep, and now one of them is sick. So I don't feel like I'm killing it in this single dad mode right now.
Welcome to being a woman. Because when we get those colds, it's not because we don't want to lay on the couch for a week and recoup. We just can't. You have to just plowing through. There's no shutting down. There's the being awake and hearing the children in the middle of the night, so you never really get to truly shut off your brain and to do all of that. How many days is Sarah going to be out of town?
Sarah's gone until Friday.
Okay. It's Wednesday. Okay. So
Wednesday.
that's doable.
I'll be all right.
Like as far as like thinking ahead, so like this is my mom brain turning on right now. As far as like planning ahead for like dinners, did like we buy some already like prep like chicken Alfredo you just throw in the oven from like Hy-Vee for like 30 minutes and that's all you have to do? Or is all the meal prep on top of everything as well?
I kind of like to cook, so that's not too big of an issue, to be honest. Like that
Okay.
that part of things is okay. And even bedtime was okay. Wake up time was okay. I struggled with the sleeping part. It was the overnight stuff that I wasn't doing what Aurora liked, you know?
How dare you?
Margot is my kid overnight. Like if Margot starts crying, I walk in and I tell her to cut it out and not to wake me up anymore. And then she says, "Okay, love you." And I say, "Love you too." And then I blow her a sweet little kiss. And I say, "Don't wake me up again." And she goes, "Okay." And I'm exaggerating a little bit. Um, and then and then Sarah handles Aurora, and it doesn't seem like it takes very long with her. I just was not doing what Aurora liked.
Right. You weren't mom. You
Whatever Sarah does,
Yeah.
it
You
was
need to have
not
her send you
what
all
I
the
was doing.
secrets
Yeah.
of the what she does when she's in the room. See, now you did, and you said you exaggerated it. I get that. But those cute, sweet little voices,
Mhm.
I don't want another one, but I miss that cute, sweet little voice because my 12-year-old now talks like this and you can't understand. He has gone full man mode. Recently, one of the moms, we were at an event together and she came up to me and she goes, "Bobbi, I need to apologize." And I said, "Okay, what happened?" And she goes, "Well, our kids were all playing video games together online with their headsets and talking to each other." And she has a daughter, and she goes, "I came in the room and I heard this deep voice, and I said, 'You have to get off right now. You can't play with grown men. I told you you're not allowed to play with strangers.'" And the daughter goes, "But mom, it's just Alex Howe."
Oh my God.
So we've reached that stage. So by the time this podcast comes out, my child has now graduated elementary school and he is basically a middle schooler at this point. I mean, I believe when we
Wow.
started this podcast, he was like in first grade.
Yeah.
He would come sit in the studio with us when we did recordings.
Yep.
Nope. He's all grown up now.
Oh,
I know.
that's fun. Well, Charlie's going to be starting second grade,
Yeah. See?
so that's fun. That's
Don't blink. because before you know it, she's done with sixth grade and she's moving into middle. Well, whenever you guys start middle school, but for us, we start middle and seventh here. Speaking of your opera,
Hmm. Uh, the opera, I haven't done one in 5 years, right? COVID kind of killed my contracts for that year, right?
mhm,
2020, all of the contracts just got wiped out. And then Sarah and I had two more kids. And so between the arts having to kind of rebuild and my time being much more difficult to manage, opera definitely got placed on the back burner. Um, so this is my first one in 5 years. I think it was Jed's first opera in 7 years. Um, but looking around that room, like at the first rehearsal, it was so cool because you kind of forget what those, if you've been away from a community that you're a big part of for a long time and you walk in, especially in this industry, you look around the room and you just see a whole lot of people. The number one, they were great friends, but they also helped you build your business. I
yeah.
mean, I looked around the room and I sold so many houses to so many people there. Um, and uh, and they were, or they referred people to me. They were supportive in a million different ways, and it was awesome. And most of them I hadn't been in communication with for the last 4 to 5 years because, yeah, we did business together, but really the connection was through opera. And so, yeah, they'd get stuff from me, like canned stuff and whatnot, but I hadn't seen them face to face, and we weren't doing what we were usually doing when we were together, which was singing. And so it was really fun to get to reconnect with, it was a 60-person chorus. It was really fun to get to reconnect with people that I, saw like 3 to 4 times a year for 3 to 4 shows a year for 10 years, and then just haven't seen for 4 to 5. Um,
But you brought up such a valid point is so many people in this industry go to conferences, go to whatever, and they hear some guru that says, grow your business XYZ
mhm,
way, whatever. When honestly, the best way to grow your business is just to lean into the activities that you already
for
love
sure.
and the people who are involved with those activities. And because they already know, like, and trust you,
Hmm.
unless you're a jerk. And Alex, you are not a jerk.
Aw,
But they already know, like, and trust you, and they want to just organically work with you. You don't have to go do something that's not who you are. So I
exactly. Yeah,
love
it's
that.
and you have a mutual passion,
Yeah.
right? So that it's something that it was really effective, and it was something that you really loved, that I really loved in the moment too. Substitute teaching was the same thing for me. I really enjoyed substitute teaching, and working that teacher's lounge was very lucrative for me as well. So truly, like when I
No, true.
started,
Yeah.
my first year, I substitute taught sometimes like two to three times a week, right? But it was another opportunity to work with people at a professional level, and they knew what I was trying to build and what I was trying to get started, and it worked very well.
Yeah.
So
And you're already
anyway,
demonstrating your competency in another area. And so it's easy to see how that competency in one area can easily carry over to competency in another area. So
exactly.
kudos to you, Alex. Good job.
I brought it full circle. I brought it around to real estate. How
From
about
man
that?
colds to real estate. That's what we're going to title this episode.
What'd you say? From man
From
colds
man
to real
colds
estate.
to
I
real
like it.
estate.
I like it.
Hey, guess what?
Do you have a book pit?
Dude, how did you know?
Well, I mean, just a lucky guess, I guess. All right.
Yeah, I guess, I guess.
Do 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 do. Bobby's book pit.
Casey, a little extra sassy kitty cat today. All right. So our book bit for this week is a book I heard about a long time ago, but just finally got around to putting it on my to read list, my TBR list, and actually get it read. And it's called Burn the Boats by Matt Higgins. And it's an inspiring call to go all in on your dreams, create a point of no return, and let that lack of a plan B propel you towards success. So the quote from the book is, you don't win when you give yourself the option to lose. And I think way too often we give ourselves an option to lose, so we never actually win or achieve all of those things that we are possible for us in our lives. So the first lesson is your instincts work for you even when things go wrong. You have to learn to trust them. One of the stories that he talks about in the book is a lady called Kaylee Young and how she how trusting her gut made all the difference for her. Her father was a New York City firefighter who helped during the 9/11 disaster. He also invented Cupboard Pro, a cutting board with a container to catch and dispose of all your food waste. So like you chop it on the cutting board and then you just swipe it over and it falls right into the little cup that it has there. And unfortunately, her dad died of cancer, the seeds of which had been planted during his 9/11 deployments. 3 months after his death, he was finally invited to come onto Shark Tank. And I actually have seen this episode of Shark Tank. And
I
after
think I
he
have
had,
too,
yes,
actually.
and
Yeah.
they had been rejected multiple times, but after 3 months after his death, they finally got accepted onto Shark Tank. And instead of throwing away the letter, the daughter trusted her gut and went on the show with her siblings. Eventually, all the sharks came together on a deal for them, and the product became the best-selling cutting board in the entire Williams-Sonoma retail chain, which is just so like I got goosebumps just saying that out loud to you today because I just she went all in and she trusted her gut. So, lesson number 2 from Burn Your Bridges: nervousness can help you perform, but it must be balanced just right. And I'm sure doing operas, you get nervous occasionally before you're out on stage. No, you don't. Okay, I get nervous still sometimes when I go on stage to speak, even though I know what I'm doing. And so, the author of this book, he actually was also on Shark Tank. When he was finally invited, he knew he deserved that opportunity. He'd been New York City's youngest press secretary, and then he went to help Ground Zero rebuilding efforts, and then he became vice chairman of the Miami Dolphins. He had more than put in his time, but still he froze with anxiety that first day that he walked onto the set. And while some nervousness can actually push you to up your game, too much of it can be detrimental. You have to find that balance in order to strike. So what he suggests is don't deny the anxiety, accept its presence and work with it instead of outright denying it. And he's got 4 steps for dealing with nervousness or anxiety to keep it at a good level for you. Is number 1, first find reassuring evidence like a scientific study proving that you're doing something right. The second one is to meditate daily, which he says he doesn't always do, but he aspires to it because it's something that he admires and knows can help calm you just even with your breathing techniques. The third one is to pick the right partner, if only for a situation. For example, his wife had been a savior at various times, but it could also be someone who's a gym buddy, just whoever's going to push you in whatever way you need them. And then finally, show your Achilles heel and fix it. If you know something is your weak spot, get on top of it. For example, by asking a friend to rehearse a speech you're about to give with you. Then finally, the third lesson of the book: as you burn boat after boat, use 4 principles to grow your success. So once you're in the water, you've got your anxiety under control. What do? You have to start building a brand new boat. These 4 principles will aid you as you take on daring new adventures in your life and continue to grow. The first one is to use every advantage you have. If you've built an audience on Twitter for your past comedy career, you can still leverage it while trying to make it as an actor. Actually, Alex, you just alluded to that. Substitute teaching and rolling that into your educational career and your opera singing. Number 2, big leaps over incremental gains. Thinking small does nothing for you. Why work at a private equity firm when you could raise $10 million to fund yourself? And that's exactly what one of Higgins' friends did, for example. Number 3, it gets easier. Your skills and experience no one can take from you. Every time you burn the boats again, you'll have more confidence than the last. And number 4, what can you do today that you couldn't do yesterday? With new lessons and new abilities comes new opportunities. Always look to the horizon, never backwards. Pick a new challenge and burn the boats again. And that is Burn the Boats by Matt Higgins.
That's a good one.
It
Burn the
is a good one.
boats. Haven't ever heard of that one. That's good.
Yeah. Well, there used to be a gentleman who ran one of the real estate offices here in town, and he used to always talk about when you get into real estate, burn your boats, burn the boats. And I asked him, like, where did that come from? He's like, it's a book. And so it took me over a decade, but I finally got around to reading the book. It's fine. Hey, Alex, guess what?
Who do we have? I don't know. Tell me.
I am so excited for our guest, and I don't know why we haven't had him on before, but we have Mr. Steve LaRue here with us today. He's a realtor out of Lawrence, Kansas. He's a past Kansas Association of REALTORS president, and he's even been a Region 9 RVP for NAR. So let's go
Is
get
that right
Steve and
that
bring him
he's
in.
never been on before?
I guess not. These are facts. It's strange.
Like that we just talked about having him on at some point.
I think we just talk about Steve just in general.
Well, you know what? Now we're executing on it, right? It's about execution.
Let's go execute Steve. That's a weird sentence. Welcome back to Kansas City Real Talk, and we are here with our guest today, Steve LaRue. Welcome, Steve. Not sure
Thanks
how
for
you've ever
having
been a
me.
guest on the podcast, but we're happy to have you.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you very much.
All right. For those people, you're over in Lawrence, so we may have some Kansas City area people who've never heard of you, which is in my world really strange, but whatever, it's facts. Tell everybody a little bit about yourself, where you came from, how and why you got into real estate, and everything you're doing in your career now.
Yeah. So I am a residential agent here in Lawrence, Kansas. I started when I was 22 years old, and I'm a little bit older than that now. But what kind of got me inspired was when we were 19. Well, I'll rewind a little bit. So my parents had me when they were 18, and when I was about 3 years old, they bought their first house. And it was a $38,000 buy level in Lawrence, and I watched them uh, kind of climb the real estate ladder as I was growing up. So they built our first house when I was going into kindergarten. They bought a foreclosure and fixed it up when I was in junior high, and by the time I was a senior in high school, Dad was building a 3,500 square foot, great big house, really nice part of town. And he didn't change his job really. He advanced in his career, but he stayed at the same place for the most part. But it was really just that home ownership that he was able to kind of change his lot in life, and so that was pretty inspiring. So. Met Kenna when I was 18 years old. She's my wife. And when we were 19, after renting for a year, we decided we would pool our resources together and buy our first house. And it was a little two-bedroom house here in Lawrence. Bought it for $82,500 with 3% down FHA loan. Borrowed $1,000 from her parents to make that work. And about 3 years later, it was worth like 120. And I had a job at the time, contractor sales. I was making under 30 grand a year. Not a bad job for a 22-year-old kid, but it had a very low ceiling. And bought that house when I was 19, married Kenna when we were just barely 20, and luckily I still have both of them. So it was a pretty great. I made some good choices when I was younger, which helped. And then Kenna became pregnant when we were 22. And so I saw that ceiling was pretty low where I was at. My uncle was a realtor, and he helped us buy that first house. And I saw the equity I was able to build in a small amount of time. And I knew that I could never have saved my way to that kind of a deal with the kind of jobs that we were working. And so with a pregnant wife, I quit my salaried job with a pension and insurance and benefits and jumped into real estate. And McGrew Real Estate took a chance with me, and it worked out pretty good. So that's how I started, and that I guess it's that American dream of home ownership, right? That's what got me into more of the leadership stuff and more of the involvement. Um, and when I was my first position was kind of a ego thing. Somebody asked me to be a director. I was like, oh yeah, I'm 25. I'll be a director. That sounds fancy. I'll get some street cred with that. And so the first 10 years of selling, I was just kind of taking advantage of the system that had been built already, and I didn't even know it. I didn't realize how rare it is that people can own their own property. There's only about 50 countries in the world where people are allowed to own real estate, and there's only a couple countries in the world where a 30-year mortgage is a thing. And the fact that I'd been selling 3.5% down mortgages on 30-year notes to people for the last 10 years, and I had no clue how rare of a situation it was. And when I realized that, and realized that it was people who it didn't just happen. It was people who had come before us that worked real hard to make sure that the rules and the tax codes lined up so that it was possible. I knew that it was kind of up to me to make sure that I did my part to make sure my kids and my grandkids had the same opportunity we did at that age. And here we are today.
Steve, I
You
love that
know,
you brought up the American dream, and I kind of want to go down that path a little bit. There's a lot of conversation, especially with the younger generation, and not to get back to the opera, Steve. Just so that you know, I just got off of an opera, so that's the only thing that's on my head. All right,
Nice.
so just got done with Turandot at the Kansas City Lyric. And I was telling Bobbi, I had a lot of clients that were in those rooms with me over the last few weeks, and it was really fun to reconnect with all of them. But there are also a lot of younger people that are in the chorus now that I didn't know before, and naturally, real estate comes up, right? They know that you're in the business, and people start asking questions about the house that they bought, right, or what I think it might be worth, and then that turned into some additional conversations with the people that didn't own property yet. And there was a group of them who just it turned into a conversation of we don't believe that homeownership is something that's truly attainable for us now. I want to hear more about that from your perspective as somebody who's uh, not just your career. Obviously, your career was inspired by your family story and by your and Kenna's story, right? But I think also the way that you view being a citizen of this country, right, is very informed by that. How do you feel about the fact that that seems to be something that may be lost to this, or at least is perceived to possibly be lost to this upcoming generation?
Yeah, it's definitely harder today than it was. Home prices have roughly tripled since the time I bought that first house. Salaries have not kept pace with it. Um, One thing I think that people need to realize is that they don't need to buy their first house doesn't need to be the same as what their mom and dad's house was that they're moving out of. And I think that a lot of people, right out of college or high school, they get a nice fancy apartment with a gym and a pool and all that, and they don't ever think about, okay, well, what am I going to do to put down roots? What am I going to do to help build that generational wealth? And sometimes you have to take a step back to take a step forward. Sometimes instead of buying that, the average price or median price in Lawrence is about 320-ish. But you can buy a house for 200. It's not going to be as it's not going to be as nice. It's not going to be as new. But it's something to get your foot in the door. And then and you don't need a 20% down payment. You can get in with 3% down or 3.5% down, and you can build equity through that first house to then be able to give you the down payment for the next house. And so the earlier you get into it and the earlier you realize, okay, well, maybe I can have something that's not quite as nice now and make it a little better. And then in 5 years, I'll have a bigger chunk of money that I can then put in a better down payment, get into that next house. It's maybe more like mom and dad's house or something in between. Really get you started on the right foot if you start as early as you can.
I think, Steve, one of the things that you said when you were telling your story that really spoke to me was I also purchased my first home when I was 19 years old. Um, my house was only $30,000, though, just to be clear, my mortgage payment was $250 a month, which was way cheaper than I ever could have rented for. And I think that that is a part of the disconnect with the younger generations right now is that the stats we keep seeing from NAR is that the average age of the first time home buyer right now is 36, which is the oldest it's ever been in our history. But the age of household formation is at 27, where people are, leaving mom and dad, getting married, starting to have families. So there's this 9-year buildup before they're actually purchasing their first home. And I think of purchasing a home at 19 and where I was in my life versus purchasing a home and where prices were when I was 36. And those are very drastically different things. But I think people don't recognize that it can be cheaper to actually purchase your home minus repair cost, all of that, than it is to rent. The process seems easier. I don't know where I'm going with this question, but just your experience around that and the mindset going into it. Because you said, you can buy your first home for 200,000, and my brain's like still even to this day, a $200,000 house is still a $200,000 house.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's not chump change by any means. I think a big part of it is that those 25 to 30-year-olds were 10 to 15 years old when we were going through the downturn in '08 to 12. And I think a lot of that generation saw their parents struggle, saw their parents get in a situation where maybe they had overextended themselves, and the luster of home ownership was tarnished a little bit by that. What I try to remind people is that it's the people who lost it during that time are the people who had to sell. So if don't buy unless you know you can stay for a while, right? Because you're fixing your payment at that point, but you don't want to get in a spot where in 2 years, oh shoot, now I have to sell. The market has not come up enough to where I can get out of this hole. So I try to tell people you got to have a 5-year plan to have some assurances. And if you go back and look at the history of real estate, at least in Lawrence for the last 75 years, there's not a 10-year time frame where if you bought in this year and 10 years later you sold where you would have lost money. There's been 2-year time frames, there's been 5-year time frames, but if you have a 10-year time frame where you can commit to it, it's I'm not gonna say it's ever going to be impossible, but it has never shown itself, at least in the Lawrence market, where that was the case. Um,
I've got a little bit of a theory here, and I want both of your takes on it because we're talking about this all across the board in some way, shape, or form, right? We're talking about inventory creation and all this stuff. But one of the things that I found out upon a little bit of investigation, we focus a lot on luxury property in my office. I'm in Overland Park, right? And there's a lot of luxury property around us. So that's what we talk about at sales meeting. I've got a couple hundred agents, and they all love talking about their luxury properties when they come up. Our average price point, right, is not $1 million, but everybody wants to talk about their $1 million properties. So if you look in Heartland MLS and you look at Johnson County, a lot of people won't believe this, and it probably sounds different in St. Joe or in Lawrence, but there are more sales in the last 365 days under 250,000 than there are over a million. And that's in Johnson County, right? And that's not taking out new home construction out of those $1 million sales, right? That's including new home construction, right?
yeah,
So I think there's a part of me thinks that we're doing this a little bit to ourselves as an industry. We're very focused on that, and we were pushing people to increase their average price, right? You make more money, right? Work harder, not or work smarter, not harder, and we're very rewarded for all of those things on social media. But I think there are a ton of people that are selling their homes directly to investors because those investors are hustling harder than agents are to try to get those $200,000 listings. And also, we're not showing off those $200,000 as though they're as sexy as those $1 million ones, even though those are the ones that people know. And the thing that kind of got me thinking about this a lot was this gal on Instagram. It's Tampa underscore Bree, B-R-E. I don't know if you guys have seen her or not. It's extraordinarily profane, not profound, profane. So she does these walkthroughs, and she has some pretty raunchy things that she says. But one of the messages is that she's tired of all of these agents showing everybody their $1 million homes when there are $250,000 to $300,000 homes available in the Tampa area that people can buy. Do you guys think
absolutely.
that we as an industry have created too much focus, right, on luxury and on all of this stuff that's going to sell well on social media versus what the consumer actually needs and what they're, really going to be able to afford?
I think in some circles, absolutely. I've tried really hard throughout my career to treat all of my buyers and all of my sellers kind of with the same uh, on the same playing field, because that first time buyer trying to buy that $200,000 house, that's $1 million house to them. That's all their money. That's
Sure.
everything they got. They are going all in to do that. And they deserve us to work just as hard for them as our seasoned buyers who are buying their third or fourth house, who are able to do that. Those big purchases. I guarantee I've sold a lot more under 200,000 than over a million.
Oh, me too.
Not just in the last year, but any week, month. decade that in my career, and it's really getting that foundation down is what the building blocks of our of the industry is you got to get in before you can get to that next level. And yeah, everybody loves the glitz of a big fancy house. I mean, I love big fancy houses. I think they're fun to go look at. They're fun to sell. They're that's a fun part, but absolutely it's the working class attainable workforce type housing that really drives the industry.
Well, and I agree with that. I think that our society has just become one that has become so obsessed with social media and everything being Pinterest perfect or Instagram worthy and it just being sexy and pretty. And we just want to lean into that because it looks good on camera. But I also like look at those photos and I'm like, would I actually live there?
Right.
No, like I would like to go like rent it out like an Airbnb for a little while. That's cool with me, but like I want to go home back to my house that I can make messy and that's just a house. But we've just become so obsessed with looks versus the actual functionality of things, and we just need a house. I think about it like when I was going through high school, McMansions were the thing. Like that, everybody was buying the big McMansions. But then the next generation of kids, they wanted to get away from that and they wanted to go back to just a regular house. I feel like we're maybe kind of like cycling through the McMansion phase again, only these are actual mansions. And also, I think not the invention, because it's been around for a while, but the increased usage of AI and creating these AI images of things in homes that don't even exist. I think that's adding on to it even more. And I just think that we're just kind of in this vicious cycle that we essentially can't even get out of.
Yeah, I tell you that the properties get me the most excited are actually the ones that are grungy
Yeah.
and dated and looking for the potential in them and just thinking
It's
like, okay,
opportunity.
well, I could make this pretty slick and being able to, whether it's for me looking for another investment property or helping one of my clients who has some vision to visualize, okay, for not a ton of money, we can really do something pretty special with this place and bring it back to what it can be. That's exciting to me. That gets my juices flowing, honestly.
Yeah, same. I love the whole process of looking. Like, I don't want to go through and do it myself because I don't have enough time, energy, or patience for that. But I love watching other people do it.
Yeah. I still take on a project here and there just because it's fun and whether or not you have enough time, you make time, right? It is what you do. But yeah, I actually got one yesterday under contract that it just popped up yesterday. I texted Ken. I was like, hey, do you mind if I put an offer in on a flip house? And she said, I guess not. And we got it yesterday. So I'm excited.
We'll be watching for
Exciting.
those photos whenever you get it all flipped and done and pretty.
Yeah.
Um, so
Well,
switching gears just unless Alex, you want to continue down this path, I'm
nope.
okay with that.
Go ahead.
Okay. Just because, Steve, you're very multifaceted in that you're in the trenches, you're selling, you're flipping, you're doing all of those things. You came up through the American dream and it inspired you to be what you are. But you're also been heavily involved with association leadership at all levels. So talk to us a little bit about your leadership journey. Have you had a mentor that you've emulated through your leadership, and what have you learned from that person or persons?
Yeah, I've had a lot of mentors, honestly. I talked about my first time getting elected as a director. I didn't really know what I was doing. I just knew, hey, I'll be on the board. And in Lawrence, at least at that time, every election was contested, so there was not any like appointments. You had to run and you had to win, and that was kind of fun for some reason. And so you kind of got into it and was doing the local stuff, and then. Uh, Decided I was going to take a little break because we had two little kids, and I said, I want to wait until my youngest is at least 4 to get back into it. And then somebody called me when Jack was like 3.5 and said, "Hey, Steve, would you consider running to be Lawrence board president?" And I said, "Yeah, I would do that." Kid that he'd be 4 by then. Well, little did we know Kenna was already pregnant at that time with our next one. So, that plan was great. It's kind of like, it, I think every time you get a plan, God comes along, pats you on the head, says, "That's cute. You had a plan. Good for you. Here's life." But got into it and really enjoyed it. Just when you have a position like that, you get to see everything. You get to touch everything. You get to see really what's going on behind the scenes, what's not just in the day-to-day business, but the bigger picture of it as well. And so as the Lawrence president, I was a director on the Kansas Association of REALTORS board of directors. And the year that I was there, we there was a talk of a dues increase. And I got the budget before, and this is my first time ever being a director on there. And I'm always kind of opposed to a dues increase, especially if we have reserves, and so I'm looking at the numbers. I'm trying to figure out how we can avoid it. And so I get to the meetings, and before we get to the directors meeting, I'm going to all the committee meetings. I'm talking to my zone vice president. I'm asking, hey, why do we need to do it this way? Why can't we do? And I never could get an answer out of anybody going through it. So we get to the board of directors meeting. I'm kind of, it's my last shot. So I stood up and I said, hey, I overall just am not really in favor of a dues increase. There's money here, there's money here, there's money here. Could we transfer that to this fund and avoid this? And I didn't know anybody in the room really. And Jeff Carson was kind of in that same thought, and he from the background goes, "Make a motion," and it's like, so moved. I didn't know what I was doing, and it got defeated. The dues increase happened. It was fine, whatever. But I had something I wanted to say. I got up and I said it. And then that night was fun night for KAR, and it was a karaoke deal in Topeka. And I got up and did my signature "Baby Got Back" karaoke, won the show, got done, grabbed a Bud Light, and the leadership team for Kansas Realtors said, "Come over here. Like, who the heck is this kid? What's he doing? You weren't afraid to say something. You got up and did that." And that kind of got me into at the state level. And yeah, it's been a pretty cool journey. Because of that, I became a major investor in RPAC when I was the Lawrence board president, because that's when I really got to see, like I said before, what the reason that this machine works is because people have worked hard for it before, and it takes money and it takes time and it takes volunteers. And uh, so when I was, yeah, so that's how I got in the state. I can go in more on the national stuff like that if you want, but that was kind of the first half of it.
Yeah, you've had a great journey, but I think my favorite fun fact so far from this episode is that "Baby Got Back" is your go-to karaoke song. And now I feel like I need to karaoke with you because I want to have this experience.
It's a crowd
Like,
favorite. I only bring it out every once in a while, but you got to have something in your back pocket.
I got into a really bad car wreck where I rear-ended someone while jamming out to that song. And so I think that's why it's connecting with me. I got their back. That's what happened. That,
Yeah.
that was a good time for us all. It was great.
Steve, do you feel like there's a lot of discussion right now about getting more volunteers involved, or even getting more people to get involved with RPAC? What do we need to be doing as an organization to make sure that new leadership comes up through the ranks and sees value in that participation? How do we inspire more people to get involved right now?
I think it takes people realizing what they don't know, right? I like I said, I didn't know that a 30-year mortgage was unique. I didn't know that low down payments were unique. I didn't know that the reason we had them was just because George Washington thought that was a cool thing. Like that. It took me realizing, oh shoot, there's like real advocacy going on every day in our industry, and I think that the average member doesn't even think about that because we're too busy doing what we do, right? We're helping people buy and sell houses. We're raising our families. We're trying to have a little fun in there also, and we don't. All we know is what we know, and we don't realize all that has gone into making the sausage, if you will, in the backgrounds. And until we can tell that story effectively to where people get it, I mean, that's the key. We got to make sure that people know what we do, why we do it, and how it impacts them on an everyday level.
I love that. Steve, we're coming up at the end of the time that we've asked of you, and we want to be very respectful of that. So the last question that we ask all of the guests is, What else? What else should we have asked you? What else should we be talking about? What else do you want our listeners to know about either being a realtor in the trenches, being a leader, or anything?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I
Welcome.
would, um, I don't know that you missed anything at all, honestly. I think it really is just making sure that people know that home ownership is attainable if they set their goals correctly, and that getting in on the ground floor can help get you to the next level. That it takes some sacrifice on the front end, and you might have to paint some walls, and you might have to live with some dated countertops for a while. But just getting in the game, really puts you so far ahead of everybody else who just rents till they're 36.
I love it. Thank you for your time today, Steve. We appreciate you, and we won't wait so long to have you on the next time.
Hey, this was a lot of fun. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.